Vážené dámy, vážení pánové, kolegové, kolegyně, dobrý den.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to welcome you at an expert lecture by Kathleen McInnis, which we organize from Creative Europe together with the Film Foundation. One part of the strategy is to evaluate the market. I am representing the Creative Europe. From our program point of view, it is consider this topic in relation to the future film. Those who know already our lectures, you know that marketing is part of our strategy and that there is a lot of space and a lot of attention focused on this part. What we mean by this topic is not that you offer yourself to the audience too much, but that you have a chance to prepare your project in such a way you wish, so that you know in advance, that you define, that you can figure out who your viewer is and how you can reach him.
Co se týče metody Kathleen McInnis, tak
regarding the method of Kathleen McInnis, from our point of view, it is possible to be used by emerging filmmakers.
Tak si myslím i pro filmaře již etablovanější, kteří
and this method can be used also by more established filmmakers who want to enter the foreign markets, for example.
Kathleen McInnis
is a specialist in international marketing of film projects focused on the audience design. She has 25 years experience with marketing and promotion, but also with writing texts about films. She is addressing the emerging filmmakers, covering all stages from script writing till the actual shooting. Now I would like to give the floor to Kathleen McInnis.
The floor is yours.
The floor is yours.
Thank you. Okay, so I speak no Czech. It's very sad. There are two people who are translating for me, and I have promised them I will speak slow. It's not so easy, but I do my best. So welcome, everyone. I'm very excited to have you here and to be able to speak to you about that. How many of you are filmmakers? How many of you are producers, directors, writers? How many of you are something else and you don't want to tell me? Oh, the secret ones back there. So today we will speak about what I believe is the new responsibility of filmmakers and visual storytellers to engage their audience for a number of reasons at many different levels. This is new. This is not how we have all been trained. And the reason that we have this conversation now is because we live in a new world, right? We live in the world of social media. 20 years ago, social media, nobody knew what that meant. Now we have changed our universe, and we as visual storytellers can change with it to our advantage, okay? So first, That will drive me crazy. I want to suggest to you that we are in control of our audience. How many of you can agree? Anybody have any idea? You are my army. We're going to convince everybody else today what we already know. I'm of the belief that visual storytellers, filmmakers, can use an audience for many things. You can use an audience to help raise money. Now, over in Europe, you have a much different funding system than we do in America. Yeah, everybody knows this. You actually have funding. We don't. But I believe that funding is changing and possibly getting smaller. Would everybody agree? It gets harder and harder to find funding for your films. How many of you know of Kickstarter? Crowdsourcing. How do you get to those avenues to work for you? You have to have audience that is following you, that is invested in you, that is dedicated to you, to begin your army of audience who will work for you. Let's see how we do. Let's just see how we do. Oh, I'm so proud when technology works. Okay. Let's go back for a sec, now that I know how to do it. I want to define this for you. Audience, you're my audience today. Artist, in this world, visual storytellers, filmmakers, people who tell stories up on screen. Industry, that's everybody else. So it's the venue, it's the sales agent, it's the press, it's the film festival programmer. Those are all the people in the middle who work on behalf of both audience and artist. As a filmmaker, you have not succeeded if you don't have an audience, right? We all agree? If you have an audience of 2, your mom and dad, you succeeded a little. You have an audience of 2 million, maybe you succeeded a little bit more. But you need an audience. Otherwise, it's a hobby. Audience needs an artist. You have to have a reason to go to see whatever it is you're going to see. You're not going to go sit in a theater and have nothing happen. And the industry is the person, or the part of this trinity that needs both. Make sense so far? So I believe, along with Viggo Mortensen here, that it doesn't just happen. Now, historically, we can agree, I think, that this is how it has been working. You, a filmmaker, would make a film. You would hand it over to a sales agent or a distributor or an exhibitor, and it would go into a theater and it would find its audience. And rarely, unless you were at a festival, would you personally engage with that audience. Your movie is out in the theater world, you go on to make a new movie, you start again. Maybe some audience who knew your first work follow you. Maybe. Maybe not, but maybe. And then you start again with your second work, maybe bringing some filmmakers or some film audience with you. And the same thing happens again and again and again. And by the time you make 5, 6, 7 films, you have built up an audience. I want to convince you today that you can build up your audience much better starting with your first film. Your first short that gets out into the world, or your first feature. Is anybody here a documentary filmmaker? Okay, so he's my tricky one right there. So mostly narrative, with a little documentary thrown in just for the gentleman back there. All right. Anybody ever heard this before? It all starts with story? How silly, right? That's how we do what we do. It all starts with story. Audience design also starts with story. Audience design starts with story, and in this case, the origin story. Origin story builds to mythology. Mythology builds to branding. Branding builds to brand identification. And you haven't even gotten your first film out onto screen yet, and I've already done all this work. It'll make sense in a minute. Okay, I'm gonna draw a diagram. I hope you guys can see this. So, traditionally, I have a really big screen, and we do circle after circle after circle. So I need you to use your imagination today. We're gonna do one circle at a time, and every circle will be another layer upon the previous circle. Does this make sense so far? Let's see how we do. We'll find out. So when I teach my students, they call this the wheel of death. I prefer not to call it that, but just to put you in the right mood. This is our nucleus. This is our beginning. This is our core. You, the visual filmmakers, are trying to get from here to here, and you're trying to do so in the best possible way. You want to reap every reward along the way to maximize your experience through this sphere. I know this sounds a little weird, but stay with me. So that you come out the other side better, more empowered than you started. How many of you have made a feature? How many of you are finished with shorts and about to begin your first feature? And how many of you don't want to think about your feature because it's too scary? Well, I do that. Okay. So, that's our goal. You want to get from here to there in the best possible shape. Yeah? And the way that we do this now is we use the film festival circuit. And at the heart of the film festival circuit, right there in the middle, are the people who make the decisions about how you're going to get through. Everybody see this okay? Programmers and decision makers are the people at the center of your experience moving forward your career and your ability to be a visual storyteller. You're coming into their system, which is the film festival system right here, trying to get in here at the highest possible level to get out the other side better than when you started. Make sense so far? Embedded in this are some other people who get in your way or who help you. We have what we call pre-screeners. And gatekeepers. And then down here we have, what did I call them? Trusted, that's a big word, by the way. Trusted outsources, and I'll explain that in a minute. And established paths. Okay, here's the scary part. These people exist to keep you out. These people exist to try to get you in. It looks simple. Just go to the bottom and then you're in, right? Just go down there. Well, what happens in our world, these spheres and the ones that are coming after these two are spinning in all directions, at all times, in all dimensions, at all speeds. So you're trying to get from here to there through a series of spinning, circling, speeding spheres of influence that you have no map or signpost to help you through the process. Make sense so far? Some of you look like you want to cry a little, but the others are with me, I think. So what we're talking about in intelligent audience design and why it all starts with story is how to start to get through this world of spheres that we're creating here. And I believe that in our new world, we have the power and we have the tools to do this via social media. That's the difference from what we're talking about today, from what you may have learned in film school or what you may have known 15, 20 years ago. That existence was not possible at that time. So what happens after this? We have another sphere, and I'm going to go through it quickly just because I want to sort of get us started. The pre-screeners and the gatekeepers, these are the people who watch your material first when you submit blindly to a festival, and their job is to narrow the field. The trusted outsources and the established past, these are people that these people trust and rely upon to get information about new films and new work and new talent that's coming. Okay? So obviously this is a little bit of a shortcut and this is a little bit of an impediment. When we talk about it all starts with story, it's not just the story of your film or the story of who you are as a filmmaker. It's also the story of who you are within this industry, within this world, within this place where people talk about each other and talk about the new artists and talk about the new work. How do we get to have people talk about us? Well, it's a good question. How do we get to have people talk about us? Anybody have any ideas? You do something drastic and the press covers it and suddenly you're talked about? Okay, we're not going to go that far. Okay, remember what this looks like, okay? Because I've never done it this way and I'm going to have to flip the page. So everybody's committed this to memory? We're going to go to the next set of circles. Okay, so those first two circles are here from the other page. And now we have a new set of circles that also drives influence. This is how we get people to talk about us and how we get the awareness to help us move past the barriers or through the established past that help get us where we want to go. Who are those people? Well, they're programmers at other festivals. How many of you who have had shorts went to more than one festival? Okay. And how many of you have had more than one film at a festival through the festival circuit? Did any of you go back to the festival you were at with your first film? And was there a different experience because you were an alumni and you had been there before? Did somebody look out for you? Did somebody say, I want to see your new work? Does somebody say, I know your work, what else do you have coming up? This is why programmers can be very good and very useful in helping us drive what's about to become our story, our mythology. We have a few more in here, though, that we should talk about. These are basically all influencers. And they include people like agents, managers, producers, alumni, other filmmakers, press people. Let's see who else we have on here. Oh, that's right, publicists, people like me, who are paid to talk about you, but we do it in a really good way. Sales agents, exhibitors, distributors. So remember, every single one of these spheres is moving in all directions at all time, at all speeds, not in concert with each other. They are moving in opposition to each other. And you're still trying to get through it. Well, I guess you're trying to do it up here, actually. you're trying to get through it to the highest possible level. How many of you think there's one more sphere at least? Okay. We had this one. We had this one. We had that one, which we just did. Now we're going to do the next one. We know who the people are who will talk about us. How do we get to them? How do we get to those people who will speak about us the way we want to, so that our story starts the path for us to get our work and us as visual artists through this maze to the other side at the highest possible level? And how does this all come back to audience? We're almost there. So how do we do this? We do it via social media platforms. Obviously, that's one of the big ones we've been talking about. But we have other ways of doing it as well. Networks, spheres of influence. We'll talk about this in a minute. Schools, other festivals, awards. All of these things are driving conversation about who you are and the kind of stories that you tell. We're also going to include in here pop culture, which can also be combined with the zeitgeist. But then we're also going to include in here, wait, hold on. Where are we going to include that? This is a weird one. Previous validation. Why do we need previous validation? For our story to make sense in this world that we're trying to get through at the highest possible level, to speak about who we are as visual storytellers, so that when we go to our next project, our next fundraising, our next outreach into the community, we do it at a higher level, with a bigger audience, who's more supportive, who pushes us and helps drives us forward. We need previous validation because we live in a world, globally, in this industry, where no one wants to be the first one to tell everybody else that you're the one. No one wants to say, you're good, you're great. This is the person who's going to win the award. That's the person who has 2 million tickets about to sell for their film. No one wants to be the first, but everyone wants to look like they're the first, right? So what does previous validation do for us? This means somebody else says, somebody that everybody trusts says, no, that's the one. No, trust me, that's the one. Really, no, I'm telling you, that's them. Who are these people? Usually, film festival programmers. Because it's at film festivals that the industry looks towards some kind of validation for what they internally know, what they intrinsically know when they see this work. Can that visual storyteller's work be of interest to a broad enough audience that my distribution or exhibition of that work will be financially successful? And how do they find that out without being brave and saying, I know in my head this to be true? They look at your experience at a film festival, especially one outside of your own country, to see how your work translates to an audience that's not necessarily just your own. How are we doing so far? Everybody still with me? Okay. We're not done with the spheres yet. There's one more. So this is how we get, these are the platforms and the vehicles that we use to get the people to start to talk about us. We know that a lot of this happens at film festivals. We know that we can use our social media platforms personally, ourselves. That drives our story, that drives audience design. We have networks that we can make full use of. You start small, and then you grow them, and they overlap, and they start to influence each other. We have our own sphere of influence, and once we're embedded in that, we have other sphere of influences that will also be of use to us. Awards always give us profile. It goes back to validation. And the pop culture and zeitgeist, if you are a storyteller who can speak to a human condition, and by way of doing so feel very current, you have an added benefit of having a platform of pop culture and zeitgeist that helps you get out there. Does that mean that you should only tell stories that seem to resonate with a modern time? No. It just means it's an added benefit for you. All right, so we had the programmers. These circles are getting smaller, aren't they? And then we had the gatekeepers and the influencers. And then we had the kind of people who can make their way through that maze. And then we had the kind of platforms that we can affect that can help us with that particular route. And now we have another question. And that is the overarching design of audience. So if this is you, and you want to get through this swirling maze of space and time, and you want to go through it at such a level that when you come out the other side, you are now up here. What does that mean, up there? It means you have more social currency, you have more industry currency. In effect, those things will help you as you try to get the next project going, as you try to get a wider and wider audience, as you try to make use of all of the materials that you have crafted to tell your story. We keep going back to story, by the way. So if we're trying to do this, where's audience? Anybody have any idea where those lovely audiences are? Well, they're up here. I need to be taller or have longer arms. And they are active. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. They are active. And they influence everything that we do. And they do it in a number of ways. Okay, so they do it by awareness. They do it by advocacy. They do it by word of mouth. They do it by buying tickets. Word of mouth, tickets. And they do it by way of being your vanguards, your foot soldiers, the first wave of people who are out there talking about you. Doing okay so far? Any questions, anybody, before I go to my next? Everyone has one. That means everyone has a story. Let's talk about this for one quick second here. What we've just described in this rather interesting way of showing you this universe that, in my philosophy, you are trying to get into and out of at a higher level with more understanding and recognition and advantage, is that we are saying that using storytelling and the narrative of the storytelling will build a community. And in this case, that community for each of you is your fan base, is your audience base. And the only way that you can take advantage of that fan base and that audience base is if you, one, know who they are, you, two, can get them to come back, and three, you can make them work. They have to do all those things to be of use to you. Otherwise, there's simply a lot of people who watch your movies and then disappear, and that's of no use to us whatsoever. Okay, there are 10,000 film festivals worldwide. Generally, we say there are 3,000 film festivals that you would consider active. Those are festivals that can be of use to you, festivals that can give you some kind of exhibition. Of those 3,000 film festivals, how many of you think they are all created equal? I can hear my translator, so I was waiting for them to get to the end. Nobody thinks they're all created equal. How many of you think that some are better than others at getting you more of what you want? How do you decide what you want? You make a list. This is the biggest thing, you guys. You make a list of your goals and expectations. In this process, you are making a decision what kind of film you have, what you want that film to do for you, where that film has the greatest opportunity to try to maximize your goals and expectations. We're going to skip that. We're going to come back to that one. And where within these four categories you might be able to make that happen. Okay. We're going to switch gears in a minute, but I want to do this first. Industry festivals, discovery festivals, audience festivals, special interest festivals. These are just a few examples here, right? Film festivals are not just one of these categories. Many festivals are 2, 3, 4 of these categories. But each of them have at least one of these being their primary category. Industry festivals. How many of you know about the film festival Cannes in the south of France? Right? Everybody's heard about it. It's an industry-only festival. It's not a public festival. You don't go as a public audience. You go because there are people there who are actively looking in the industry of film for new talent, new work, new product. But it has a great impact in all the other areas we talked about, yeah? Has a great impact if you have a film there with regards to everything else. If your film was at Cannes, you have a lot of social currency, you have a lot of industry currency, you've got big validation, right? So it's an industry festival, but it has a lot of impact. Sundance, how many of you know about Sundance? Okay. Does Sundance have the same level of currency as Cannes? No. It has a very different kind of currency. It has really high value currency for American indies and has medium value currency for world cinema. Each festival is different. Each festival has its own mission, but it also has its own personality and it has its own strengths, which is why not all films belong at Sundance, right? Let's do some numbers just so we understand what we're looking at. I don't want these numbers to depress you, but they're kind of important. Sundance receives over 10,000 submissions for short films every year. 10,000. 9,832 maybe. It's a lot of short films. How many short films do they take? 70. Approximately 70. They get approximately 4,000 to 6,000 submissions for feature films. This includes docs and narratives. How many do they take for competition? 110. What do these numbers mean to you? Does that mean that there are only 70 short films worth looking at? Well, I'd say no. I program short films for really big festivals. I think there's more than 70. Does it mean that there's only 110 competition films worth looking at? No, of course not. But what it means is that for the mission of Sundance, those are the films that they think best represents their mission. What is their mission? First and foremost, they're an industry festival. The Sundance team, programming team, is telling you with the films that they program that they think these are the films that are most likely to be financially successful in the marketplace and that represent new talent or evolving talent at its highest level. But that's only from an American perspective. It's an American festival. Nobody in their right mind would say that Sundance speaks for the programmers at the Berlinale or Carlo Vivari or San Sebastian. So every festival is different, every set of programming mandates is different. How do you know where you fit in with your film, with your set of goals and expectations, with your set of needs, and with what you want out of that festival? Well, we're going to come to that. Discovery festivals, Toronto is a really good example. Those are festivals that speak directly to the discovery of talent. That's that validation we talked about before. That's that mark. Toronto is saying, for example, we say this is amazing talent that you should be on the watch for. We say this is amazing talent that continues to supply us with extraordinary storytelling. Audience festivals, that's the flip side. Those are festivals where there are more of an everyday average audience. What do those tell us? Well, those tell us how broad your audience potential is for the kind of film that you've been making. So if you're a Czech film and you go to Seattle Film Festival and you win the Seattle Film Festival Audience Award, does that do you any good? Let's do some numbers. I'm beginning to like this number thing. All right. So let's go to Seattle. You all know where Seattle is? Anybody not know? Okay. Think Nirvana. You go to Seattle with a Czech film and you're in competition and you're up for the Audience Award, which is the Golden Space Needle Award. That's because there's a big space needle that sits in the middle of town. They're kind of famous for that. So Seattle has 170,000, forgot I was in Europe, 170,000 audience members. Of that, it's a 25-day festival. And of that 175,000 audience members, approximately 60 to 70,000 of them vote for the Golden Space Needle Award. So if you have a Czech film that wins the Golden Space Needle Award at the Seattle International Film Festival, what does that say to distributors? It says that Czech film plays to an American audience really well. Really well. If it can play there, I should buy it and play it all over, right? Now I'm going to pose this to you. You're a filmmaker of that Czech film that just went to Seattle and just won the Golden Space Needle Award. You had 170,000 potential audience members available to you of people who were already going to go to the festival. You have 60 to 70,000 people who are going to be voting on the films that they see. At Seattle, you play 2 or 3 times to houses that are anywhere between 300 to 500 strong in the theater. So let's say on the outside, because you're really good and everyone loves the film, you have 1,500 people who see you. And of those 1,500 people, enough of them voted high enough that you won the award. That means they're fans of yours, right? They like your work. They like your work enough that they voted for you. Are they valuable to you? Yes. Are they valuable to you as an asset when you're selling the film? Absolutely. They got you that award. How else are they valuable to you? You going to make another film? Anybody think they're only going to make one film ever in their whole life? If that was the case, we'd be in a different hall. You're going to make another film. And what if instead of starting from scratch to get that new audience, you started with 1,500 people who already liked you? And what if those 1,500 people who already liked you so much they gave you an audience award were so invested in your work that they became spokespeople for you? And they helped supply you with finances. And they helped be tastemakers. And they helped convince other people that they should be following you. Now what happens? Not only are they an added value asset to you as filmmakers and an audience, they're also a financial value added asset when you're selling the film. So you have that Czech film that won that Space Needle Award in front of all of those people, and I say, I want to pay you $10 for your film. $10, because I'm going to do all the work. I'm going to have to find audiences all the rest of the way around the world. You know, it's a lot of work for me, and I'm going to do the heavy lifting. I'll pay you $10. And you say, I don't think so. Because from this one festival alone, I have 1,500 people who are already my advocates, who are already telling the story of my film to the rest of the world, who have already started to do the heavy lifting. So I think you should give me more than $10 because I'm already bringing this to the table. That's the beginning, and I know we took a long time to get here. That's the beginning of intelligent audience design. Okay. We're going to come back to that too. How do you increase audience that matters? It's better together. That means it's not one, it's not two, it's all of you. In theory, all of you who have a good time today and who think I'm engaging and smart and really nice will go out and tell people about me. And you'll increase my social currency, my social media awareness. And in theory, I feel the same way about you. You all look very charming. You seem very nice. I'm going to follow you. And I'm going to be promoting you and your work. And we are increasing our social currency together. And by way of doing that, because we're doing it within this industry, in theory, it's going to elevate us all because we've done that together. That's pretty much what we're talking about right there. All right, so I believe that I'm a little nervous about technology, as you can tell, which is crazy since it's what I talk about. No, don't. No, I'm going to do it. I swear I'm going to do it. We talked a lot. Are my guys up there? They're there. Good. How am I doing, you guys? Okay? Good? Okay. We talked a lot about the theory of what this whole conversation about intelligent design, audience design is. And it is a new way of thinking for filmmakers because many filmmakers don't think it's their job. Somehow this is somebody else's job. Let's talk about the jobs of a filmmaker, of a visual storyteller. Creation, concept. You have to think of the story. What's the story that you want to tell? Pre-production. Well, we can even go further. Creation, concept, and then development. You have to develop that story, right, into the story that you're going to tell. Pre-production. You have to get ready to actually shoot that story. Production. You have to film the story. Post-production, you have to edit and add all the other parts of the puzzle to the story. Is that it? Are we done? You know it's a test. Of course you're not done. You're not done. You might have been done 20 years ago as a filmmaker. You might have been done at that point. You are no longer done. If you feel that you are done at the end of post-production with your project, you are missing the greater part of your career and of your profile and of your story. So think of it as an iceberg. The part we see is the part above the water. That's this part. The part that anchors what you do is the part beneath the water, which, as we know from icebergs, is quite a bit bigger. What does that look like? What happens after post-production? Well, after post-production, you have distribution and exhibition. You have avenues. You have audience. You have trying to get to your audience. If you plan in conception for where you want your film to go as you find your audience, you will help yourself greatly along the way. And you will help, we'll talk about this more later on for some of our filmmakers, but you will help keep your filmic language intact for as long as possible. How many of you are directors again? Of the directors here, how many of you think it's important that we know what your language is, how you feel about the story that you're telling? Is that important for us to know? If Jan's telling me a story about a little kid with a red balloon, and he's telling me that story because it's important for him to tell the story of loss and coming of age. And I hear this, and I translate it to be, he's telling me a story about a little kid with a red balloon who loses the balloon. Is that the same as loss? No. Subtle difference, but no, it's not the same. So we want to keep this language intact as long as possible as you, as a visual storyteller, as an artist, drive towards your audience. That's really important. The way we do this is we keep you not only engaged all the way through as your job, but we start you as a visual storyteller and artist with this concept from the very beginning. That's the new ways of communicating content that we're talking about up there. We're going to come back to that. We're going to come back to that. We're going to stay here. How many of you, can we make this participatory? Do you guys feel like you want to be involved? Or is it a little scary and you just want to sit there and quietly? Don't ask me a question. All right, I'm going to pretend that I know the answers that you would give me, but if I don't hit them, please yell them out, okay? We're talking about how you make decisions for your film to find its audience. What are some of the goals that filmmakers might want for their films on their way to finding their audience? So let's say I'm going to use the film festival circuit as my way to find my audience. What are the goals that I have for my film to achieve in the film festival circuit? Well, it might be I need press. I need awards. Obviously, I need to find audience. And within that audience, maybe I want to engage with that audience because I don't get to do that very often. Right? I need press so that I have profile, so that people hear my story. I need awards, perhaps, because that goes to validation for people who might want to buy my film. I want to engage with my audience because as a visual storyteller, I don't get to do that very often. So this is my opportunity to do that. I might want to increase my network of other filmmakers and industry. I might want to meet other programmers for my next film, other producers, other collaborators, other artists. I might want to engage in that world on a global level because I don't have that opportunity when I'm at home in Prague making my movie to sit at a dinner table with people from 20 other countries and talk about what they do and how they do the same thing that I do. These might be a list of goals that you're looking for from your festival experience. How do we pick festivals based on our goals? This is going to seem like we're 5 again, but trust me, even though it seems simple, we often forget it. If I want press, I must go to a festival where the press are actually attending and writing about the films that are in the festival. And specifically, writing about the section that my film is in. Does this make sense? Whoa, get rid of that. That has to go away. What is that? Wherever that is, yeah, there we go. There's nothing worse than seeing yourself up there. That's terrifying. It's like, why are they looking at that all of a sudden? All right, let's go back to this. Let's go back to press. Makes me very nervous now. All right. If what's important to me is at my festival experience, I need to make sure I have, let's say, a review. The way you sell your feature film is by a review in a trade magazine. Variety, Hollywood Reporter, Screen International, and to some degree in North America, IndieWire. Those are the only 4. There are no others where a review can sell your film for you. A good review can sell your film for you. So I have a feature film, and I go to the film festival circuit, and I need to get press coverage, and specifically a trade review. I better make sure that the trades are there, and that they are reviewing films in the section that my film is in, right? How do I get the trades to review my film? Any idea? Do I just say, sorry? Just invite them. Yeah, come on over. Come on over. Perfect. How do you get to them? How do you get to the people who assign the writers, the reviewers, to your title? You just do your homework? What's the homework? So you have to find out who's writing the reviews and how to get to them. Okay. So let's do a little math for you. You're trying to finish your film to get it ready for your world premiere at a major festival where you know that the review is all important. How much time do you have to do your homework? You have to find your time, or does somebody on your team have to find the time? Is there a person who helps you in this particular regard on your team? This is a big difference between North America and Europe, you guys. This is what a publicist is for. This is a big difference. European filmmakers don't often make full use of that team member. And this is why they can be so helpful and why they can be so useful. It's not just job security for me because I'm a publicist, that we actually have a reason to be in your world. So let's do a little math, okay? Let's show it up here on the screen because this will make more sense. If I find out in November that I am accepted to the Berlinale, and I am going to screen the second week of February, right? And I have to make sure that I am delivering my film to the Berlinale. I think your delivery date is the first week of January, right? So in the middle, between November and the first week of January, there's this little holiday called Christmas. Huge amount of people seem to take that off. There's also New Year's. Huge amount of people seem to have fun on that one too. And so you really only have about 3 weeks to get your film finished, if it's not already done, through the labs, which are now very, very busy because there are so many festivals that are happening at the same time, and everybody's trying to finish their film. And in front of the assignment editors at the trades who will make their decisions on what titles to review, because they don't review them all, they will make their decisions on what titles to review right around the middle of January. And the reason I say the middle of January is those assignment editors are also busy making the same decisions for Sundance and for Rotterdam. So Sundance, it goes in order, Sundance, Rotterdam, Berlin. The small number of people who review films, review them at all of those places, and the assignment editors have to decide, because they're not going to pay for all of those titles to get reviewed, they have to decide which titles they're going to give a review to. How do they do that? Well, some of the big titles obviously always get reviewed. Some of the smaller titles, like what you guys might have, get reviewed because there are relationships that are trusted between a publicist and the review editor, where that review editor says, oh, it's Kathleen again. Okay, we got hers. We got her 3 titles. We got her 4 titles. Good, done. If a filmmaker is reaching out, it's not quite as effective, because filmmakers always say they have a really good film. If a publicist reaches out and says, look, I've got 3 titles. 2 of them are this, 1 of them is this, they're all worthy, this is why they're worthy, that's a different conversation. So that conversation, by the way, happens right around the time you're all celebrating the New Year's. That conversation is between the week between Christmas and New Year's. That's the conversation I'm having with the journalists and the review editors. For Sundance, by the way, I'm having that conversation no later than December 5th. December 5th. You didn't get confirmation you were in Sundance until November 25th. And then you got announced a few days later. And then a few days later, I'm out there trying to sell your film. It goes pretty quick. It goes pretty quick. Some of you will have already learned much earlier, but some later people get last-minute notification. So that's one thing. I have to make sure that the press that are there are covering the kinds of film that I have in the festival. I want to get awards. Well, I have to make sure I'm in competition. Pretty straightforward. I want to get in front of an audience. I want to be able to engage with my audience. That's important to me, to hear how that audience thinks of my film. Well, guess what? Not every festival hosts a Q&A, a question and answer for their filmmakers. In Berlin, at some of the screenings you get a Q&A, and at some of them you don't. You literally go and you wave, hello, hi, and then you're gone. That's not the engagement you're looking for. I want to network with other filmmakers. I have to make sure that I have that opportunity. If a film festival is bringing me in, it's not just for 24 hours for one screening, that they're going to put me together in a place where I can engage with my colleagues, my new colleagues, and with industry. Many festivals separate filmmakers from industry for some reason. I don't understand it, but they do that. So we have to look at these things as we're evaluating our goals and where we can hope for the majority of our goals to be achieved. So you all know about the Berlin Film Festival. Can we name the top 5? Berlin, Cannes, Toronto, Venice. Let me say Busan, because we have to look at Asia. That's the largest one in Asia. But close, right behind them or right next to them, we can name any number of others. Rotterdam, Sundance, Karlovy Vary, Thessaloniki, Guadalajara, Mar del Plata. There's a lot of festivals out there that can give you a great deal, if not all of this, available to you. So how do you narrow the scope? Well, you need to know what kind of film you have, right? What kind of film story did you tell? Did you tell a story that speaks to the audience for that particular festival? The audience at the Berlinale is different than the audience at Sundance. And the audience at Sundance is different than the audience at Mar del Plata, and et cetera, and et cetera, et cetera. How do we make that decision? How do we figure out what we have and where it might find a home? How many of you think the filmmaker is the best one to make that decision? You all know my tricks by now, don't you? It was a trick question. The filmmaker is the last person who knows what they have. Trust me. You are the last person who knows what you have. Your producer, second to last person who knows what you have. The reason you're the last person is that you know too much. You went through too much to make this tale, to tell this story. And therefore, you have too much embedded in the emotional and rational part of you to be able to separate out and say, what did we actually get to? So who are the people who can help you? Well, certainly your producer can help a little, maybe. Other industry people can help you, people you trust. Your publicist, your strategist should be able to help you. It's helpful to remember that everybody has an agenda. So if you say to your DOP, what kind of film do you think we made? And your DOP says, some of the most brilliant cinematography I have ever seen. We really have to go to the top cinematography festival. It will be brilliant. Okay, great. Good on you, cinematographer. But that's not necessarily going to return the greatest amount of possibility for us. So everybody has an agenda. Your publicist, your strategist, your producer. The trick here is to remember that everybody has an agenda and factor that into your decision-making process. How many of you watch, online is fine, but how many of you watch the films that come out of other festivals? You watch Sundance films, Berlinale films. Okay. Everybody who's not raising their hands, that's your homework. In my opinion, you can't know what the world and the audience in that world is unless you see the work that is currently out there. You can't know what programmers are looking for and what kind of films are touching audiences unless you see it for yourself. How do you find that work? You literally go online and you start, look, films don't have an expiration date anymore. You can go online and you can find films from the past 10 Sundances, the past 20 Berlinales. You can find the films. It's worth looking at. It's worth seeing what is playing out there so that you are aware. You guys know you have one of the top film festivals in the world in your country, right? Carlo Vivari stands as one of the top film festivals in the world. In Carlo Vivari, there's a section called Work in Progress, where you will see in July a work in progress version of films that will come out the following year on the festival circuit. So all you have to do, because I know you have nothing else to do, all you have to do is take a holiday in the middle of summer and go to Carlo Vivari and watch movies, and in particular watch the Works in Progress session, and you will see the films that will then be at Toronto and Venice and Locarno and Berlin and Thessaloniki, et cetera, and Sundance, on and on for the coming year. You're kind of special that way. Nobody else gets to do that. So that's one thing to remember. What's the difference between a goal and an expectation? Anybody want to take a stab? So a goal is, my goal is that I have to get press. The expectation is that, I shouldn't have written there. The expectation is that I can get good press that will add value to what I'm doing. So that's the difference. My goal is to get press. My expectation is to get good press that will add value to what I need. Okay? So how do we make a list of expectations, satisfy are goals? Well, you make the list of goals first. You make a list of expectations second. You make a list of film festivals third. And then you invite a whole bunch of people over to your house and you get out of the way and you let them watch the film and you figure out what kind of film you have to see if it matches your list of goals, expectations, and festivals. Okay. We have to always bring this back to driving advocacy, driving awareness, audience design. Part of that's going to come into social media. How many of you have social media platforms? Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, websites for yourself, websites for your film. Okay, room for improvement, but it's a good start. There was a conversation while you guys were on break about what does your first festival experience need to do for you. I want to talk briefly about that before we lose time, and then we'll jump into the audience design and how easy it actually can be for you. What does your first festival experience have to do for you? It has to do more than simply drive your second festival experience. So your first, we have this thing in our world, in our film festival world, we have this thing that's really important. It's called premiere status. And premiere status is so important because it's how we define discovery. So if we are a big festival and our brand, the festival brand is discovery, we have to be able to discover you. We can't do that if you've already played 20 festivals and they've discovered you. It doesn't really work that way. So premieres, world premiere, international premiere, country premiere, continent premiere, are important that way. It's also how we drive reviews. It's how the review editors make an assessment of which films to prioritize to review. They're going to want to review the newest films first. So you have a better chance of getting your review on your world premiere than you do on your country premiere. 10 steps down the path. So you have many things that you have to do at your first festival experience, including driving your awareness, your branding, your story, getting the actual raw materials that you're going to need to sell your film, including your review, getting your filmic language out to the public, maximizing your iconic image. That's the imagery that you've taken during production that will stand and speak for your film in all of your marketing. You also want to establish yourself as the filmmaker of your next project at your first film festival, because this project is already done. All those people at that festival who are interested in meeting you and talking to you, they want to know what you're going to do next. So if you're the filmmaker who waited until you were finished to start your next project, you're going to be behind. Sorry. If instead you're that filmmaker who has multiple projects always trying to move forward at the same time and you're always ready to talk about the next one, you're going to be able to take more advantage of your experience. Does that make sense so far? All right, let's talk a little bit about social media. So the reason that this is up here is that a lot of this might seem overwhelming. You're like, I'm one filmmaker, I'm one director, I'm one producer. How much can I do? I believe firmly that the same way you put together your team, your producer, your DOP, your editor, your composer, you should also have, well, it's quite nice, isn't it? You should also have on your team the person who is going to work on your behalf for maximizing your profile. That would include somebody who's doing your social media, who is strategizing your publicity, your festival experience, the branding, the filmic language. And here's how you start to prioritize. There actually is a better time for things like social media. If you look at this carefully, it really does come down to Wednesdays at about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Does that really mean that that's the only time? No, of course not. But what it means is if you're trying to map out a plan that's not overwhelming, you actually can do that with regards to the different elements that you're trying to work on to maximize all your opportunities. That's just another way of looking at it. Wednesday, 3 p.m. See what you can do there. This is just, I don't want you to be overwhelmed by this. I want this to serve just as a visual reminder of how this all works together. Everything is connected to everything else. Everything drives everything else. And if you can maximize where you are moving your story, not just the story, the film story, but your story, if you can maximize where you're moving that and how you're moving that, you can get a lot of, you can receive a lot of advantage off of that. And remember, in your world, everything is visual. The more visual you are, which is why Instagram is better than Twitter. Twitter with a photo is better than Twitter without a photo. Facebook with lots of art is better than Facebook without. You guys are visual artists. You're not just writers and oral storytellers. Go where they are. This basically means go find your audience. Don't wait for them to come to you. Go and recruit them and give them something that can keep them engaged. Determine what barriers need to be removed. What's holding an audience back from being your foot soldier and getting the word out about who you are? Well, the first thing that holds them back usually is they don't know who you are. So let's make sure they know who you are. And the second thing that holds them back is they don't know how to work on your behalf. You want to make sure you can tell them how they can work on your behalf. What does that mean? They can spread word of mouth. They can retweet. They can get word out when you have screenings at festivals. They can show up and buy tickets. There's lots of opportunity. You have to make sure you know and can translate to them how they can get out and work on your behalf. Think through the relationship. How many of you are single? Nobody wants to say. Okay, there's a few of us. How many of you are married? Really? 3 of you are married in this entire room? Okay. How many of you have partners? Oh, I see how this works in Czech. Okay. This is really about that. Do you want to be married? Do you want to be engaged? Do you want a one-night stand? Are you looking for fun, sex, children? It's the same thing here. Who are these audience members to you? Are they long-term? Are they short-term? Are they actively engaged? Or are they quick drops in the bucket? It will make a difference as to what you're giving them by way of tools and also how you keep them. The same way as it does when you're in a personal relationship as well. Give them more than one way into your world. That's what we spoke of before, is how to get the barriers down, bring them in. We have a few documentary people, right? 1 or 2 documentary people in the audience. This is simply a little graphic that helps to describe how it's much easier in documentary to do this outreach because you have action items. Particularly now, very successful documentaries are about social justice and change, and you offer a way for your audience to actually take action after they've seen your film. That is one example of a way to bring your audience in and then help them by giving them a tool that they can actually affect on your behalf. Easier with documentaries than it is with narratives. So usually this is the end of the PowerPoint, and usually this is me saying thank you to you. I want to turn this around. In this case, this is us saying thank you to our advocates, also known as our audience. How do we say thank you to them? How do you say thank you to an audience, and why would we want to do that? Well, part of it is we want them to feel important and empowered because we want them to come back or we want them to stay with us. These are important factors as we think about this relationship with our audience. It's lovely if they're transitory. If they come and go, okay, that's lovely, but I need some of them to be so firmly supportive that they stay in my world. How many of you have more than 100 people on your Facebook page? Okay. Of those of you who have more than 100 people on your Facebook page, what keeps those people there? Is it what you write on your wall? Is it how you engage? Is it because they're all related to you and they have to stay? All these things are worth considering because it's the same thing here. How do we get our audience to feel appreciated and therefore be willing to continue their relationship with us? It's a two-way street. So we have about 10 minutes left. The first thing that I'd like to do is I'd love to open this up to questions, just in case that we could answer some direct questions. We have another film we can also show that's about 4 minutes long, but I'd like to do questions first. Okay, unless you're all numb and nobody wants to ask a question. Wow, they're numb. There you go.
Okay, I have a question. Do you have any rules for social media propagation, like what the director or the screenwriter can write just to look, good in the public?
Yes. So the question is, do we have any social media rules? And the answer is yes. And we can describe these rules as best practices. So the first and foremost thing to remember is you are visual storytellers, which means when you are making a decision as to what to post, think visually first. You are representing by way of your postings your visual imagery and storytelling. So that's key, number one. Number two, ask yourself, does this help me in my way of my profile? Does it help engage my audience? Does it help further my personal path as a storyteller? If the answer to any of those things is no, reconsider the posting. If you are the kind of storyteller for whom your personal politics and your personality are embedded in your storytelling, then by all means feel free to include that in who you present. I would suggest that it's important to be aware of what that might do. It might polarize your audience. I personally think that that's fine for people like me. It helps separate my audience a little bit. You may feel you don't want to do that too early on. That's a decision you'll make, but it's something to ask yourself. Come on, guys, really? You know there's more. Yes.
Thanks. How would you touch the audience of the small kids, which are actually not on the social media?
How do I, say it again, how do I get to the audience who is not on social media?
Not on social media. I mean, especially the small kids, the kids below, say, 12 or so.
Well, first of all, I think most 12-year-olds are on social media in some way, so be prepared. So this is a really good question because you're trying to advocate to an audience who actually isn't in control of their ticket buying decisions. And so the way to get to them is through their parents. So I know it seems simple, but at some stage it will switch. 14, 15, they start to become in control of their own money spending around that age, and they make really different and specific choices with regards to where they'll spend their money. At that point, you can be directly engaged in accessing them, and they are all on social media. 12, 13, and younger, you're really looking at people who have their decisions made by their parents or their family, and so you really want to engage with them at that level. The one thing that will help you is if your content is driven for, let's say, 12 and under, and you're in festivals where they have programs specifically for that age, you can make use of that festival's social media. You can really maximize your outreach by way of that festival system that's already in place. Is that helpful? Okay. Come on, guys. Who's going to be number 3? Come on, you can do it. You can do it. I know you can. Somebody is confused about something.
Okay, if nobody else, so you talk about audience a lot. What I'm interested in, first of all, you talk mainly about American audience or American-based. In Europe, there is something which we call cross-border audience, which you didn't actually mention at all, and determining actually how to approach and how to discover which audience actually is cross-border. And not only that, there's something which more and more one talks about target audience.
Okay.
And maybe if you can mention something about that.
Okay, so let's speak, hang on just a second, cross-border and target. Okay, so let's speak very specifically about this. My whole conversation today has not been about American audiences. Not at all. My specialty is world cinema outside of North America. So I apologize if I gave you the impression I was only speaking about American audiences. I'm not. Cross-border, Europe is a perfect example because of the EU system of country movement between countries. Your cross-border audience, I'm going to suggest, is really an example of a global audience. From my perspective, you as visual storytellers have to speak to the human condition. Doesn't matter where you start your story, what culture you come from in that storytelling. If you speak to the human condition, your story will travel, and we will cross borders without any problem. It is the reason that foreign films, and I mean foreign by way of whatever country you're in, foreign films actually have a market outside of their own country, right? If we didn't speak to the human condition at large, no one in another country would have any frame of reference to want to be engaged in your story. You use the film festival circuit to help cross borders with regards to audience. Your access to a global audience is absolutely 85% open via social media. And when I say 85%, there are countries that won't allow you access. We have problems with China, we have problems with Iran, we have problems with certain countries and access via social media. But 85% of the world is accessible via social media with regards to audience engagement. You can take advantage of that. You can use the film festival circuit as your methodology to get to those audiences, or you can use social media outreach to do it just maybe not as fast. Target audience is a different issue. Target audience is really interesting. There is the concept that you tell a film that is more geared towards a certain demographic. So just like we spoke about telling stories that are meant for 12-year-olds, right? You may say, my target audience is males 18 to 25. And that's the majority of who my audience is. How do we access them? Well, there's a whole business model in place for how you access your target audience. My opinion, just my opinion, is that if we speak in developing audience design, if we speak only to our target audience, we miss the greater opportunity of a larger brand and a larger awareness of our film. So I'm not as interested in just reaching a target audience because there are business models that help you do that, and that has more to do with distribution. But I am much more interested in trying to use that demographic to drive a larger audience share. What do I mean by that? If my audience, target audience for my film, let's say I made an action film, and traditionally, old-style action films are young men age 18 to 25. That's the biggest demographic. Blessedly, if they like your action movie, they will go multiple times, and they will spend money each time they do it. Okay, I know that I need to get to that audience, and I understand that that's who my film is going to be the most interesting to. But how do I spread that awareness? What do 18 to 25-year-old men have in common? They often date somebody. Can I reach out that way? They often grow up into slightly older men who are still interested in action films because they didn't realize they got old. Can that help me? Can I maximize my outreach in some way that is a much broader design that will sift down to those 18 to 25-year-olds? In my marketing material, in my visual. If I'm trying to reach a specific target of 18 to 25-year-old men, I'm not using an iconic image of a kiss. I'm using an iconic image of something blowing up. But if I'm trying to reach the people that they date, because one of those times that they go to the movies, they're probably going to have to take that person, then I might use the kiss. So that goes back to me crafting materials really early on in production that can get used both ways when I'm trying to sell this film to my target audience via my audience outreach. Is that helpful at all? Sort of, maybe. He's being very kind right now, I can tell. One last question, maybe, that we can do in 2 minutes? No pressure, but if you're the last question, you get to, you get to choose how we go out.
Well, you can basically answer yes or no, but the question, to this question, the question is, so you still behind, or you still support the idea of the demographics audiences like 18 to 25 and 25 to 30, all these things? Or not really, because I think these days it's pretty much mixed up.
Yeah, it is pretty much mixed up. And for what I do, because I work, it's not an easy yes or no, but it is an easier answer. I don't work with big budget Hollywood movies. Those movies are marketed using target demographics, and they've specifically designed that business model for that to happen. I don't work on those movies. I work on character-driven independent films that are more art house, and for me, that's all mixed up. I no longer believe that I can maximize my outreach by simply targeting one specific section of an audience for what I do. If I worked in big Hollywood movies, I would think differently. But for the kind of films that I work at, the kinds of films that go through the festival system, the kind of films that use the festival system to enhance the filmmaker's career for the next project, I think it's all mixed up. So it's a qualified, yes, they're mixed up, no, I don't target. So you guys, that's 12 o'clock. I would like to say thank you to you now because I feel like it has been an enormous privilege to be here. I can only hope that you found it interesting and somewhat illuminating, somewhat inspiring. But I would also like to know further from each and every one of you. So if anybody would like to reach out on social media, I'm on Facebook. It's the easiest way to find me. I would be delighted to know all of you. And I guess, thank you.